In the chilling wilderness of early spring in Maine, my hiking buddy and I stumbled upon an eerie, heart-stopping scene. It was a day or two into our hike, far removed from the comforts of civilization. The air was frigid, and a sinister sense of foreboding hung heavily in the atmosphere. As we trudged along the desolate trail, the biting cold clawed at our exposed skin. Our breaths crystallized in the air, a visible reminder of the unforgiving conditions. And then, from the midst of the forbidding woods, we heard it, an unsettling, desperate cry for help. We followed the haunting wails through a gnarled thicket, and there, in the midst of this wilderness nightmare, we discovered two girls. Their faces were etched with terror, and their trembling bodies were clad in nothing more than flimsy garments ill-suited for the merciless cold that enveloped us. A sense of dread washed over me as I realized the gravity of their situation. The forest was an oppressive force, its towering trees casting ominous shadows as the day grew darker. The eerie silence was broken only by their voices, now quivering as they recounted their ordeal. They had lost their way and were teetering on the precipice of survival, their feeble attempts to shield themselves from the elements with a one-season tent offering little more than a cruel illusion of safety. As the night descended like a shroud of doom, the temperature plummeted to bone-chilling depths. The girls huddled together, their frail bodies shivering uncontrollably. They had already consumed their meager supply of sustenance, and despair clung to them like a vengeful specter. Their futile efforts to start a fire were a chilling reminder of their dire circumstances. All they possessed for ignition was a solitary book of matches, cruelly soaked by the relentless downpour of their first day in this wilderness abyss. In that desolate, freezing wasteland, the realization dawned upon us: had we not stumbled upon them, death would have been a certainty. The freezing night, with temperatures plunging far below freezing, would have claimed them, leaving behind only the mournful echoes of their cries. We offered them shelter, our meager supplies, and the warmth of our flickering campfire as the haunting night stretched on. Together, we endured a long, sleepless vigil, our hearts heavy with the knowledge that had fate not intervened, these two lost souls would have become victims of the unforgiving wilderness. As dawn finally broke, the forest seemed less malevolent, and we set out to lead the girls back to civilization. Their lives, hanging by the thinnest of threads, were saved by our timely arrival and a stroke of luck. In the haunting aftermath of that night, the importance of preparation and knowledge in the wilderness became an indelible truth. In the fall of 2011, my buddy and I embarked on a camping adventure to Beaver Lake near Bolivar, Missouri, expecting a serene escape into the wilderness. Little did we know that our journey would descend into an eerie and unsettling nightmare. Our first day began with a promising hike, as we scoured the rugged terrain for the perfect campsite along the lake's edge. The sun bore down relentlessly, pushing us to the brink of exhaustion. After several hours of hiking, we finally found a spot that met our criteria: clear, open, and close to the water's edge. We decided to rest and take a brief afternoon nap to recharge our energies before indulging in some evening fishing. However, as we lay there, the tranquility of the place began to unravel before our eyes. It was as if the lake itself harbored a sinister secret. As we strolled along the lake's edge, we noticed something that sent shivers down our spines. Dozens of fish skeletons and the lifeless bodies of turtles littered the shoreline. It was a haunting sight, a macabre display that defied explanation. Hours of angling that evening yielded nothing, not a single solitary bite. Our moods grew progressively somber, tainted by a growing sense of unease. Nightfall arrived, and we retreated to our campsite to prepare dinner. What happened next is what still haunts my dreams. The woods, which should have been alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, were eerily silent. No hoot of an owl, no chirping of crickets, not even the rustle of leaves or the distant call of a coyote. It was as if the very heart of nature had ceased to beat. My friend and I exchanged anxious glances, struggling to comprehend the unnatural stillness that enveloped us. The absence of bird calls and the chatter of squirrels gnawed at our nerves. Something was profoundly wrong. We realized then that we had only packed enough water to last us through the first night, relying on the lake's abundance to quench our thirst during the trip. But now, the lake itself seemed cursed, its waters tainted, and its surroundings devoid of life. Fear gnawed at us, and we had no choice but to abandon our plans and break camp in the eerie, oppressive darkness. Our departure was hasty, our steps filled with trepidation. As we retraced our path through the barren woods, we couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked beneath the surface of Beaver Lake, something that had silenced the once thriving ecosystem and threatened our very existence. To this day, the memory of that nightmarish camping trip haunts me, leaving me with countless unanswered questions about what malevolent force had cast its shadow over that forsaken place. When I was just a kid, barely 5 or 6 years old, my dad and I embarked on a seemingly idyllic adventure in the heart of Yellowstone National Park. It was supposed to be one of those picture-perfect vacations, straight out of a feel-good movie, tossing stones into the serene lake, the crisp air of the wilderness, and the distant echoes of nature's symphony. Little did we know, our journey would take a spine-chilling turn that would haunt my dreams for years to come. The day was drawing to a close, and an ominous chill began to creep through the forest. The once sunlit woods were now enshrouded in darkness. My dad and I were walking along the tranquil shoreline, lost in our own world, when we noticed something peculiar. There, right before us, was a man slumped against a gnarled tree. At first, we thought nothing of it. We assumed he might be a weary traveler, taking a moment's rest. But as the hours grew late and the cold bit into our skin, concern began to gnaw at my dad. He feared the stranger might have lost his way in the wilderness and, in the freezing night, wouldn't be able to find his way back to camp. Reluctantly, we decided to approach the figure. With every step closer, an unsettling stench began to pervade the air, not the scent of decaying flesh but something far more sinister, the stench of excrement, like a vile, gut-wrenching odor. My dad instructed me to stay back as he cautiously approached the still figure, calling out, "Are you okay?" Silence. No response. Again, my dad asked, his voice trembling with concern, "Hey, are you okay?" Still, no reply. Summoning all his courage, my dad reached out and tapped the man's shoulder. That's when it happened, a sickening crunching sound, as if the very life had drained from the figure. The man's hat fell to the ground, revealing a nightmarish sight. It was as if all the blood in his body had drained to one side, leaving his face grotesquely contorted. One eye, a gruesome shade of red, appeared to have burst blood vessels, creating a ghastly visage that would forever haunt my nightmares. My dad's face paled, and without uttering a word, he rushed back to me, a look of sheer terror etched across his features. He left me in the care of a kind, maternal ranger who, in my memory, resembled Big Bird from Sesame Street. He hurriedly led another ranger and a paramedic back to the horrifying scene. It wasn't a tale of a gruesome bear attack or a monstrous creature lurking in the shadows, but the very real horror of discovering a lifeless body in the heart of the wilderness, far from home. It was a memory that would forever be etched into my young mind, a nightmarish encounter with the unknown that would haunt me for years to come. "7 years ago, when I was a last-year camper at our Eerie overnight camp nestled in the heart of New England, I experienced a chilling night I'll never forget. It was a night that shattered our innocence and plunged us into a nightmare of terror. Our camp, surrounded by a thick forest, had a tradition of sending each cabin on an overnight trip. That year, my cabin and another were destined for an overnight spot perched atop a massive, desolate hill. At its summit, a barren rock lay amidst the encroaching trees, casting sinister shadows in the moonlight. Our fascination that summer had been fueled by dark tales of townies, those mysterious locals from the nearby town. Though they rarely ventured into our camp, we knew they lurked just beyond our sanctuary. Right on the other side of the towering hill we were to camp on, they called their own Eerie territory home. As kids often do, we took our imagination to dark places, pondering what would happen if these townies decided to invade our camp. Our sinister fantasies brewed throughout the session, and it wasn't long before we began to hear strange noises in the night. Late in that unsettling night, as darkness swallowed our surroundings, a hushed whisper spread among the campers like wildfire. We thought we heard people lurking in the woods, just beyond our makeshift campsite. The counselors dismissed our fears as mere imagination, but two of them decided to investigate, perhaps to put our young minds at ease. Let me paint a picture of these two brave souls: Joe, a towering figure at 6 feet 3 inches, a physical specimen, and Thomas, a more average 6 feet 0 inches in height. They ventured into the inky abyss of the forest, promising to return with reassurances. However, the tranquility of the night was shattered when, from the depths of the woods, we heard Joe's voice. It wasn't a shout, but a thunderous, aggressive command that sent shivers down our spines. "You guys cannot be here, this is private property," he bellowed, his voice carrying through the eerie silence. "We have a walkie-talkie and will call the police if you do not leave." Fear seized us, our hearts pounding in our chests. But what happened next would haunt our nightmares for years to come. There was a deafening bang, the sound of someone struck with unimaginable force, followed by a spine-chilling scream that chilled us to our bones. In an instant, Joe burst from the woods, his face contorted in terror. He pointed an accusatory finger at the other counselors, his voice trembling as he screamed, "Get the kids out of here now." Without hesitation, he dashed back into the foreboding woods. Panic erupted among us campers. The night seemed to close in on us, and our survival instincts kicked into overdrive. We sprinted down the rocky, densely wooded hillside in nothing but our underwear. There were tears, prayers, and desperate grabs for makeshift weapons in the form of branches. It was a descent into sheer terror, a moment that would forever haunt my dreams. About halfway down, Joe and Thomas, along with the other counselor, caught up to us. The adrenaline-fueled hysteria was finally punctuated with the revelation that Joe and Thomas had been playing a sinister prank on us. They had never informed the other counselors, who believed the danger was real. In the aftermath, the camp implemented a strict policy against counselors scaring the kids. But that fateful night on that desolate hill, where terror and imagination collided, still lingers as the most haunting experience of my life, a chilling tale of childhood innocence lost to the darkness of the unknown. My girlfriend and I embarked on a camping trip deep in the woods, 5 hours away from the comforts of home. We set out the day after a ferocious storm had swept through the region, leaving an eerie sense of isolation in its wake. The guy at the entrance to the desolate campsite informed us that we were the only souls brave enough to stay there that weekend. We thought, oh, this is going to be an adventure. Navigating down a narrowing path, we finally arrived at our designated spot. It quickly dawned on us that we would need to reverse the entire way out once we were ready to leave. But we shrugged it off, unloaded the car, and began setting up our tent. The woods around us were enveloped in an unsettling silence. The brightness of the day couldn't chase away the eerie feeling that we shouldn't be there. Ignoring our instincts, we ventured further into the woods, our footsteps the only sound breaking the silence. Our path led us to an uncanny sight, a cluster of white cabins, identical and devoid of life, sitting far away from the main campground area. Their uniformity sent shivers down our spines, and we couldn't shake the feeling that we were trespassing in some forbidden territory. Returning to our tent, we decided to ignite a fire. Inexperienced campers, we fumbled with self-lighting logs and lighter fluid, surrounded by a damp wilderness. We realized we needed kindling, but dry twigs and leaves were scarce. After much effort, we managed to start a small fire, cooking hot dogs and marshmallows while gazing at the stars. Night crept in, shrouding the woods in an impenetrable darkness. My easily spooked girlfriend whispered, "Can we get into the tent now?" We extinguished the fire and crawled into the tent, but before we could relax, she clamped her hand over my mouth, urging me to silence. The forest was no longer quiet. Heavy, unnerving footsteps echoed outside. I whispered, "It's probably just animals." But then came the mumbling, faint but unmistakably human. Words eluded us, muffled yet deliberate. We froze, eyes locked in the dark. The footsteps and the mumbling drew nearer until it seemed they were right outside our tent. Our hearts pounded in our chests. And then, silence. We waited in breathless anticipation, unsure of how much time passed. Eventually, my girlfriend whispered, "We have to get to your car." Adrenaline coursing through us, I peeked outside, urging her to stay behind me, and we sprinted to the car. I locked the doors, and she demanded answers. What the hell was that? "We can't stay here. It's just us." What was that? I scanned the surroundings, saw nothing, and replied urgently, "Okay. I'll grab our stuff. You stay in the car." With trembling hands, I snatched our ice chest, then the tent, hearing those haunting footsteps approach once more. In sheer terror, I yanked the tent from the ground, wrapped it hastily in the tarp, and threw it into the trunk. Without a word, I got in the car and asked, "Is everything in here?" She confirmed, and I floored it in reverse out of our campsite. As we raced along the twisting paths, we reached a fork in the road, utterly disoriented. Desperation pushed us to make a random choice, leading us to another empty campsite. I cursed softly and reversed again. Then, from our vantage point, I spotted a small sign behind an overgrown bush, marking the main path back to the gate. We sped away, but before we left, I glimpsed a single, small green light in the woods to our right, near our original campsite. The entire 5-hour drive back to our hometown was a blur of anxiety, and we collapsed on my girlfriend's parents' couch at 4 a.m., never to speak of that night again. The memory haunted us, and the desire to camp again faded into nothingness, lost forever in the dark and silent woods. It happened during a camping trip a few years ago when I was just a teenager, and it's a night I'll never forget. It was one of those eerie midweek nights when the park was unusually quiet, and I woke up suddenly with an urgent need to use the bathroom. The trailer I was in was parked in one of those corner sites, and there was a shortcut through the woods at the back of the site leading to the comfort stations. Normally, I'd take the shortcut to save time, but that night, that shortcut became the stuff of my worst nightmares. As I left the trailer, a sense of unease washed over me. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the woods were cast in darkness. I knew the shortcut was there, a narrow trail through the dense woods, but it always felt like a gateway to the unknown, especially in the dead of night. I trudged along the trail, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it, a soft, eerie giggle, like it was right beside my ear. My heart leaped in my chest as I glanced around, my flashlight trembling in my hand. I thought it might be an animal, a raccoon or a porcupine, something that could explain the strange noise. I strained my eyes to see through the pitch-black woods, but there was nothing. No rustling leaves, no twigs cracking underfoot, nothing that would suggest an animal. Panic started to creep in, but I told myself I was overreacting. But then it happened. Just as I was about to dismiss the giggle as a product of my tired mind, a voice, a chilling, disembodied female voice, whispered, "Hello?" I froze, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. There was no mistaking it. It was a voice, clear and unmistakable, but it didn't sound human. Fear overtook me, and I didn't wait to investigate further. I sprinted, my feet pounding the forest floor, not caring about twigs or rocks. In my frantic escape, I tripped over a hidden log, tearing my pants and gouging my shin. I finally reached the comfort station, gasping for breath and feeling utterly foolish. I tried to convince myself it was just an animal or a figment of my imagination. The rational side of me, the biologist in me, wanted to believe that. After using the restroom, I made a decision. I wasn't going back through that woods, shortcut or not. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had consumed me. As I passed by the entrance to the woods, I gave it a wide berth, trying to put as much distance between me and that ominous trail as possible. But then, just as I thought I was safe, I heard it again, a sinister, whispered invitation, "Come back." I didn't need any more convincing. I ran faster than I ever thought possible, my heart in my throat, my mind racing with terror. I was too scared to look back, too terrified to find out what might be lurking in those woods. Thankfully, my family got a new trailer the following season, one with an indoor bathroom. I've never ventured to camp bathrooms at night by myself since that horrifying night. I can't explain what happened, and I don't know if I ever will. All I know is that some things are best left unexplored, and the darkness of those woods holds secrets that I hope I never have to uncover. In the eerie summer of the 1980s, my mother embarked on a camping trip with her friends deep within a secluded forest. As a teenager, she was no stranger to adventures, but this one would forever haunt her dreams and make her vow never to let her children venture into the wilderness. The group had selected the most isolated spot they could find, far from prying eyes, primarily so they could indulge in underage drinking without the risk of being caught. The dense woods enveloped them, their green canopy blocking out the moonlight, casting an inky blackness upon the surroundings. As the night wore on, laughter and the clinking of bottles filled the air, their teenage exuberance masking the danger that lurked in the shadows. The clock crept past midnight when the party reached its zenith, and the alcohol began to blur their senses. Suddenly, as if summoned by the dark forest itself, an eerie silence fell upon the campsite. My mother, awoken from her tipsy haze, heard distant rustlings, soft whispers carried by the wind. Panic welled up within her, and she shook her closest friend awake, a quiver in her voice. "Did you hear that?" my mother whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Her friend, still groggy and disoriented, assured her it was just animals, a common occurrence in the wilderness. "Go back to sleep," she urged. Reluctantly, my mother did just that, succumbing to the reassurances, hoping the sounds were merely the nocturnal antics of the forest's inhabitants. But the night had more sinister plans. With the first light of dawn, they emerged from their tents to a chilling discovery. Large boot prints, imprinted in the earth, encircled their campfire and weaved a haunting path around their sleeping quarters. These prints had materialized out of nowhere, emerging from the dense woods, then disappearing back into the forest in the same eerie fashion. They couldn't follow them further due to the impenetrable foliage. Fear gripped their hearts as they realized that they were not alone in the wilderness. Panic spread through the group, and they hastily packed their belongings, abandoning their planned week-long camping adventure. The very forest that had seemed like a safe haven had betrayed them, leaving them shaken to the core. Their unsettling experience didn't stand alone. Rumors circulated that others had encountered the same inexplicable boot prints over the next 2 years. Each time, they left behind a sinister trail of uncertainty and fear. Yet, despite the collective unease, the mysterious intruder was never apprehended, shrouding the forest in an unsettling aura of mystery and dread. My mother's chilling encounter in the woods during that ill-fated camping trip left an indelible mark on her. She vowed to protect her own children from the lurking horrors that could befall them in the wilderness, passing down her fear and caution, ensuring that we would never venture into the unknown, far from the safety of civilization.